Hello, my friends. My name is Gerdes, and here are the three big stories for today. So, what on earth is happening in Kursk? Okay, so this is late Thursday afternoon. This is the most recent information that we have. I'm going to look at a CNN article, and then I'm going to look at a number of YouTubers. We're going to look and see what Ryan McBeth had to say. He will mention Jake Bro along the way. We'll look at Anders Puck Nlelsen. We'll look at Operator Starsky and see what they have to say to help us understand a little bit more about what's happened here. Russia says it halted Ukrainian incursions into its territory. Evidence suggests it hasn't. The intention, say U.S. and Ukrainian officials, is multifaceted, in part to disrupt and demoralize Russian forces, and in part to divert Russian forces away from other parts of the Eastern Front. Okay, so that makes perfect sense. You're trying to move forces from the Eastern Front where they're taking ground and try to shift them somewhere else, or you're trying to demoralize, or maybe you're trying to take some ground, like somebody else was saying, Polyadak, I'm mispronouncing his name, the president's office. He was saying, they're trying to take some real estate from the Russians. Okay, maybe that's what's going on, but why? I mean, and are you planning to stay, or are you planning to, really hold on to this, or what's going on? Okay, this comes after Russia claimed on Thursday to have halted Ukrainian incursion into its territory. Well, they said that on Tuesday morning. They said that on Wednesday afternoon. They said it Thursday, and they were lying each time. Although the latest evidence from the ground suggests fighting continues in the Kursk region. The Russian Ministry of Defense said that its units of the North group of its forces, together with the Russian Federal Security Service, the FSB, continue to destroy the Ukrainian armed forces. I don't see that that's happening. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced on Thursday that residents of the region who have been forced to leave their homes would be given a one-time payment of 10,000 rubles. That's about $115 US. So that's not going to go very far. Mick Ryan is the author of Future Doctrina blog and an analyst in the war in Ukraine, and he said Thursday that the Ukrainian military had deployed, now this is really helpful and insightful, the Ukrainian military had deployed quality formations. It appears that unlike in the 2023 Southern counteroffensive, where fresh brigades were employed, the Ukrainians have allocated experienced formations to this attack. This already appears to be paying dividends with the depth of the Ukrainian penetration so far. So they have solid troops. Those solid troops are attacking conscripts. We'll talk about why conscripts are important and why they're not very good in a little bit. Kyiv remains silent on incursion, so it's still the fog of war. We just don't know what's going on. And Ukrainian allies, like the United States, are just saying, Ukraine has a right to defend itself. Talk to them. Okay, so with that set up, I talked about this earlier, just a couple hours ago, what I knew at that point, where we talked about what Georgie had said from Ukraine Matters, and we talked about what William Spaniel has said as well. And we also looked at this, where Gerasimov's telling lies, and Putin knows, like, look at Putin's face here. Putin can tell this is not true. He knows that this is not like, no, you have not destroyed this many people or this many units of whatever tanks or armored vehicles or what have you. And you could just like the feeling in the room, just watching the video as Gerasimov is reporting this is just, it's almost painful. Okay, so here's Anders Puck Nlelsen, and he's going to help us understand a little bit of his perspective about what's going on, because it's something more than what we thought was happening. Well, what I thought was happening yesterday, Tuesday, when I said, I don't know that anything will come of it. Something came of it. Listen to this.
The first thing to note is that this is definitely bigger than the previous raids that we have seen that Ukraine has conducted on Ukrainian territory. So we've had these instances before where some Ukrainian forces or some of the Russian volunteer forces that are fighting for Ukraine, that they have crossed the border, they've blown up some stuff in Russia, they've taken some prisoners, they've taken a bunch of photos, and then they return back to Ukraine. And this time, it's much bigger. We can see that by the number of soldiers that Ukraine is using, but we can also see it by the types of equipment that are being destroyed in the process. So, for example, the Russians have shown that the Ukrainians brought a Buk air defense system into Russia. They have released a video about how they destroyed that Buk system. And this is a valuable system. It's a significant loss when Ukraine loses an air defense system like that. So
that's right. So they're going over the border with good men, solid men, not fresh volunteers, experienced men, equipment, tanks, armored combat vehicles, artillery, a book air defense system. Like they're serious about this.
Fact that they were willing to take that risk, it shows that this is not just a PR stunt. So what's happening here is definitely bigger than a raid. But I've also seen some people suggesting that maybe this is the beginning of a whole new big Ukrainian offensive into Russia, and Ukraine can maybe take the city of Kursk and those sorts of things. And I also don't think that's what's happening, because we have...
So what's happening, because we don't think it's this and we don't think it's that, and we're going to try to ferret out some answers. We just don't know. He's not going to say that he knows either. So let's hear what Ryan McBeth has to say about this here as well.
It doesn't appear like Ukraine is left. I'm not sure if Ukraine is trying to perform some kind of deep strike in order to destroy something tactical. When Jake Bro picked me up from the airport last night, Jake was like, he thought that Ukraine was trying to go after some kind of natural gas shipping yard or connection line.
Okay, what he's talking about there is this. Ukraine armed forces control the Sutsa gas metering station in Russia. Nearly 50% of all Russian gas exports to the European Union flow through this station. It's the only operational Russian gas pipeline supplying the European market. So that might have been what Jake was referring to.
Something, and maybe, but why wouldn't you use a missile for that, right? So I'm not entirely sure what they're doing, and the only thing I can think of is that perhaps Ukraine detected that Russia wanted to open up another front, and so Ukraine decided to attack into Russia to create that dilemmas, not problems for Russia. Like, oh my God, I need to shift troops up further north to protect that area. Now, the other question is, how the heck did Ukraine do that?
Now, before he explains how did they do that, let's think about this. One explanation for this raid is it's just a raid over the border. It's a PR stunt. Another explanation is they're trying to shift troops up. A third explanation is they're trying to gain some real estate. But how did they do it? That's really interesting. So let's hear his explanation for that.
How did they get what I am guessing right now is 2 brigades into Sumy and then over into the border? Because I've said it before on podcasts that essentially the lines in Ukraine are static. And they're static. I am parched. It is so hot out in Las Vegas. Essentially, the lines are static because both countries have such good ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, that essentially you can't build up anything more than a company, or else you're going to get detected, either because of your thermal properties of your vehicle, because of the visual properties of a whole bunch of vehicles being lined up ready to go, signals, your vehicle's emitting radio signals. It's impossible to form up anything more than a company. But somehow Ukraine did it. And the only thing I can think of is that maybe since Sumy is so close to the border, maybe they hid those vehicles. Russia just isn't looking there. So if you're not looking in a certain area, you can build up as many forces as you want. So that's certainly a possibility. And there's the other possibility of Russia might have seen forces being built up there and decided to ignore it. That happens. So it could just...
And that would be my guess, that they saw it, hey, these forces on the border, they're not going to come in and attack us. They're just trying to hold us out.
That there were some Russians who were like watching the Ukrainians build up south of Kursk or in Sumy, and they're going, they're not going to do anything.
So that's another possibility. Okay, let's keep going. Let's hear what Operator Starsky had to say about this. He was just talking about how capturing 300 Russian prisoners, and that's where he left off on this.
100 men. Even though this number is hard to confirm so far, but the reports state that the Russian personnel deployed in this area is extremely demotivated and untrained. How big is the area lost by the Russian regime?
Now, they're demotivated and untrained because they're conscripts, and conscripts don't roll the same way as volunteers do. Conscripts have to be there. They're conscripted. They were drafted into service, and they have to put in their time. And they're like, whoa, wait, we didn't sign up for this. And so that might be why they're having the success that they're having. Experienced troops against conscripts.
Kursk Oblast. According to the Russian reports, they've lost at least 10 settlements over the past 3 days, specifically Novoivanovka, Lyubimovka, Obuchovka, Pokrovsky, Darina, Sverdlikova, Lebedevka, Gogolevka, Gornal, and Oleshnya.
That was easy for Starsky to say.
It is estimated that approximately 25,000–30,000 men were involved into this special military operation, including tanks like T-72 and different types of armored vehicles. As of this moment, there's absolutely no commentaries coming neither from the armed forces of Ukraine nor from the Russian freedom fighters, so we can safely assume that anybody could be involved into this operation. We have absolutely no idea as of now. The Russian media have gone absolutely mad, suggesting that Kyiv will have to explain entering the Russian territory using allegedly Western vehicles.
I mean, that's what the Russians are going to be saying, but the U.S. hasn't been involved in this. This is Ukraine using Ukrainian equipment and Ukrainian stuff and Ukrainian men, and yeah, so that's where they are. So it's really interesting how far and how fast they've gone running over conscripts, and we just don't know what the end game is. So one part of the end game might be something like diverting troops, and we think that that's part of it. Another one might be taking real estate, but another one might be just making it difficult for Putin where he really has to address it. And that's what Anders Puck Nlelsen is going to come to here.
Continuation of that development. And the reason why this is happening is that Ukraine has identified these attacks into Russia as being essential for their chances of ending the war on terms that are acceptable. As I've said in other videos, the only thing that is more important for Putin than winning the war in Ukraine is to keep the power in Russia. And ultimately, this war is very much about regime security in Russia. Putin started the war because he thought it was important for the sort of long-term perspectives for regime security, and he still believes that is the case. So the only way Ukraine can make Putin stop the war is if they can turn it into a bigger regime security risk to continue the war and then to end it. So
and that makes sense. And so that might be what they're trying to create. I don't know that they're thinking this is a silver bullet, but it certainly is creating dilemmas for Putin. Okay, let me shift gears to my second big story. Yesterday, Scott Ritter's home was raided by the FBI. We don't know more about that. All we know are some very basic facts and articles about it, about who he is and that they were there, but no other information has come out yet. Everything else is like a day, 22 hours, 23 hours, 20 hours ago, but no other new information. And when we get to that, I'll be sure to tell you about it. In other news, this is the third big story. President Zelensky met with a bipartisan delegation from the U.S. House of Representatives to discuss Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression, focusing on air defense, protecting lives, and ending the war swiftly for a just peace. Now, it's important that it's bipartisan. What you don't want to have happen is that this just becomes a partisan issue where only Democrats are involved in this or only Democrats care about Ukraine. You want to expand that pool as much as humanly possible, and that's a good thing that it's a bipartisan delegation. Last little bit here, Kyiv Post put this out, and I thought, this is right. This is spot on about where the war is. Let it not be lost among the blizzard of headlines that for the first time since World War II, Russia is weakened to the point that a foreign army is now maneuvering inside Russian territory. That's something. And then I saw this. It was just a meme. Mr. President, Kremlin is now liberated. Crimea. No, I said Crimea. And then finally, Darth Putin, the sarcastic site, is saying, when I said I wanted a buffer zone around Kursk, I didn't mean for Ukraine to create one. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.